Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's panel interview on the fourth industrial revolution. I'd like to welcome everyone and thank our panel members for joining us today. Dr. Ian Buckle has over 30 years' experience in general practice in the private sector and the NHS. He runs a private practice on the Wirral, concentrating on reconstructive, aesthetic and implant dentistry. Ian is also a director of the Dawson Academy. Dr. Colin Campbell is the owner of the Campbell Clinic in Nottingham. He has placed over 5,000 implants and undertaken over 10,000 surgical procedures. He's also responsible for developing education for healthcare professionals in implant dentistry and has personally developed many courses in this field. Dr. Sinead McEnhill is director of the Belmore Dental Clinic, a referral implant and cosmetic dental clinic in Enniskillen, Irish Practice of the Year 2017 and Best Northern Ireland Practice of the Year. Sinead's practice specialises in extensive implant and restorative dentistry, incorporating smile design. So our subject is fourth industrial revolution, and I'd just like to put our first question perhaps to Colin. The fourth industrial revolution, what it means to dentistry and how do we respond?
Digital dentistry, I think, is in the process of fundamentally changing dentistry forever, in the way that it just changes the workflow for the whole of the dental team. So many of the tasks that were quite onerous and time hungry in the past have become much more efficient and much more predictable and actually much more exciting to be able to include the whole of the dental teams involved in that. So it's a shift towards a new way of working that perhaps other industries have moved towards much earlier than dentistry. And CAD/CAM is not new in engineering in any way, but it seems that everybody thinks it's new in dentistry. So I think we are probably just catching up in terms of technological advances with other areas of industry.
Yeah. And how do you feel that reflects, Colin, with regard to the patient experience and the patient journey?
I think what a lot of the digital advances in dentistry allow you to do is to verify a lot of your work in advance of treating patients, is to bring patients much more involved in the treatment planning aspects of work, which is essential both ethically but in terms of the way the laws change in dentistry. It allows us to involve the patients much more at planning stages. From a surgical perspective, it allows those of us involved in surgical procedures to actually much more carefully plan the surgical procedures and make decisions in advance of the patient being operated upon, and then therefore providing hopefully more predictable outcomes for patients in the end and better treatments. So as an advantage to patients it's huge, and as an advantage to the profession it's huge also.
Ian, obviously your practice is particularly involved with the Dawson Academy. Your practice has been very sort of full reconstruction, occlusion and TMJ based. What have been the benefits for you of introducing digital dentistry into that treatment regime?
The benefits, no doubt. I mean, we use a lot of CBCTs, MRIs, and like Colin says, it's one of my sort of taglines is, when do you want to find out? And it's about trying to know stuff ahead of time. So we can use a lot of the things diagnostically, get the records correct, because the better planning we can do, the better outcomes we can get for our patients, and the more predictable those outcomes can be. You know, so we've incorporated a lot of the digital part with hopefully some of that sort of biological issues as well, to try and get the best results for our patients. And I think sometimes one of the things that we forget is that our patients don't understand all the things that we understand. And so even just some of the simple digital stuff that helps the patients see what we're trying to explain to them. And if we can lead them on a journey that helps them get to where they'd like to be, I think that's much more powerful than us sitting in the dental chair saying, we could do this for you. And so I think one of the great things that technology allows us to do is to communicate better with the patients and help them see ahead of time the outcomes, like Colin said.
Yes, thank you. Sinead, I think I'm right in saying you're perhaps a more recent adopter of digital dentistry in the practice than Colin and Ian. So what have been your experiences for the last 2 years?
Well, I suppose since I invested, digital has always been a part of my sort of treatment planning and so on in terms of CBCT, but it's really properly since I invested in CEREC Omnicam, mainly for implant related sort of restorations, that I suppose, just got to the point where I couldn't quite believe that I hadn't been using it before. From the software systems to the combination of all things, and I know that I'm a person who has mixed it up a little bit with different systems and have ultimately found it very exciting to sort of jump in and out of various databases and so on, and just how the way that you can actually figure it out and make it work has just created a huge amount of excitement within the practice. For myself, the patients and the team have obviously had a huge part to play in that also. So, I mean, it's just changed the feel of the practice, and I just think the value that comes with that is an automatic.
And do you feel that digital dentistry is just for high-end dentistry, or do you think it has a place in?
I think
any
it's
other areas?
from the point of view of just assessing patients annually, doing, assessments on, think about the ageing population, for example. I mean, those patients deserve to be managed and scanned and treated in the least invasive way possible. And as the ageing population takes over and increases in years to come, it's going to be the most predictable and accurate way of managing these patients. For implant dentistry, it's an automatic. It's just simple for even just the most basic of 2 implants on a lower arch, for example, to manage an elderly patient in the easiest and most predictable fashion.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Colin, I'll put this question to yourself, if I may. Digital dentistry is moving very quickly. We certainly saw that at IDS Cologne this year. Should you wait to invest?
Well, no, that's a bad. It's always a bad strategy with technology. So I think we know about the sort of law of diffusion of innovation, and a certain percentage of the population will pick up things early and a certain percentage will pick it up late. But to wait until it's finished is a fool's game, because it's never finished. So it's like buying a laptop. You would never wait until the next best laptop comes out. You would buy the best laptop available now. I think one of the important things about anybody thinking about getting involved in digital dentistry is there's a learning curve associated with this. You can either see that as a barrier, or you can see it as a wonderful, exciting challenge. And for people that see it as a challenge, it's really rewarding. And for people that see it as a barrier, it's going to be difficult. So it's just in the way that the implant dentistry remotivated a generation of clinicians in the 1980s and 90s, digital dentistry is remotivating clinicians now. And I think the short answer to the question is no. You should look at ways of bringing this into your practice to advantage you and your team and your patients as soon as you can.
Well, it's also fantastic from the point of view of just all of a sudden the doors of communication have opened up between technician, yourself. You used to sit for long hours every day just sitting, figuring it out yourself, lonely in your surgery and getting quite stressed, whereas now the burden has been halved, maybe even less than that, by talking with the technician, with your patients, with your staff, because everybody's involved and everybody's equally enthused about it.
Yeah, I think it's bizarre that it's taken this level of technological advance to almost make dentistry more human, because the interactions with people are much better in this area than they were previously, because it was bizarrely robotic when you didn't have the technology involved.
I think as well, dentists, they're not always the best communicators as well. I think probably by the fact that we're sitting here, we might be good talkers, but not all dentists. They tend to be C personalities, and anything as well that opens the door to communicate with the patients is a good thing. But I also think, one of the things that I've been consistently better is having a good business plan. I tend to sort of go from my heart and then make it work somehow, which I think a lot of us do. But I think, like Colin was saying about the laptops, is there'll always be a new and a better one, but if you buy stuff now, you will get a good return on your investment. There's no doubt about that. It will stand you in good stead.
Well, if you cut your practice costs by 2% based on the fact that you no longer use impression materials, cleaning scenarios, and postage and all of the rest that goes with managing lab work, all of a sudden that's an investment in your lease for your whatever digital item you buy.
And what Colin said as well about the learning curve, there's a lot of things that I've done it myself, where you think, I'll just buy that and that'll solve all my problems. And nothing can solve your problems. Only you can solve them. It's not about the impression material, it's about what you do with it. And it's the same with digital. It's how do we handle it, and we have to commit to it. And the great thing is there's great courses and stuff out there now, so people can help you to learn this. Some of it has been exciting to learn over the years, but now people do know how to make this predictable and productive in your practice. So if you commit to a learning experience, and then I think we'll be in good shape.
You're not innovating if you're involved in digital dentistry now, because the innovation's been done. Yeah. So you don't have to worry about the fact that you're going to be left on an island somewhere and nobody else knows what you're doing. There's lots and lots of people to share with and communicate with, and actually that's one of the wonderful things about it. It's meeting people that are doing similar things to you, making friends, and makes your job much nicer, makes your working life much better. So it's like all of these things that when a new thing comes along, there's a tribe of people that will become involved in this and take it forward, and it's actually quite an exciting, interesting place to be.
Yeah, we touched earlier on about the importance of education and support. I think
Yeah.
any investment at that level, and without question, it's paramount.
Yeah.
We spoke earlier on about interoperability and different platforms working together. Are there any frustrations you found while adopting your level of digital technology that have been restrictive, or you could change in a major way?
From my perspective, being involved in a what we call complete dentistry, trying to sort of go right from patient's examination through records, through treatment planning, through creating provisionals, and then to the final restorations, and then also being involved with orthodontics, restorative, implants. And you'd find, that there was a great implant studio, but it didn't talk to the orthodontic part, and then there was a great restorative part, but it didn't talk. But that's just teething problems. And the cool thing is that you find ways of working around it, and then a lot of those workarounds get incorporated into the new stuff now. And there's new stuff on the market now where it's like 3Shape has its dental desktop, where all those things are starting to get much more integrated now. And so, like Colin was saying,
I think it's like everything. It's the first year, isn't it? It's the troubleshooting that everybody, the team, yourself, and you find. But ultimately, if you are trying to do something on the doorstep and it's going wrong, press a button, it's gone to a technician. Oh, I think it has to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Today it's not going to work out. So so they go back to the old regime.
Yeah.
But at least you've got the comfort of knowing that, and then you're straight on the phone to somebody to help.
Well, that's it. And there are great people out there what amazes me about dentistry is there's so many people willing to help you. It is a great community. I think sometimes we sit there on our stool thinking we're in this isolated little world. Well, again, one of the great things about digital is I can speak with a technician in Sweden or America, or it doesn't matter. Colin and I could be talking to. It doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah.
Sometimes the people you talk to less these days are the people in the practice.
Yeah. It's a community of educators, I think, isn't it? So, I think I'm right, same with all three of you. You have in-house milling and lab type options. Sinead, maybe I can ask yourself, lab or in office, and when does that choice? When do you make that choice? What influences that choice?
Mostly time restrictions for me. If I wanted to do multiple units of high-end aesthetic work, I would send it to the lab. I would plan it by DSD. I would have a nice digital wax-up done, and I'd put a patient into Smile Trial. For implants, single units, no problem. It can all be planned and done surgically, and very often immediately loaded on the same day. And it's just quite astonishing, even still, for me to believe that can be done.
Yeah.
So patients walk out, they watch their crown being milled, and they walk out with nothing. They come in with nothing and they walk out with a fully restored implant. So to me, that's still very exciting, even a year later.
Indeed, yeah. And Colin, you've got an in-house lab, so I'm guessing a lot of the work gets pushed to the lab, but do you still do some chairside milling?
No, we still use it, because there's advantages to each system. So the chairside mill is really quick for single units, so it's much quicker than a 5-axis mill. So this is the type of things that you find out. So there are certain things that you would always mill in because it's not a chairside mill, it's just a smaller mill.
Yeah.
So there are various things that will mill in there, and then when you have a bigger mill and that mill's running, then you can schedule your work and use it on a chairside mill. I think it's really important for people who are looking to jump towards this to understand how it fits into their style of practice. Because if that's what you have to do, you have to find the angle that it's going to work for. I'm an implant surgeon, I don't do any restorative work. So for us to bring something like this into the practice was a big deal, because I'm never in my life going to do a CEREC restoration. And so we had to see how this was going to fit 3 or 4 years ago into one of the major providers in the practice, and then we could diversify it out to other people. And that's a really important thing. There is a system there that works for you. It's just finding out how it works best in the practice and the style of treatment that you're providing. So whether it's whichever angle, whichever piece of kit you decide to start with is personal to your own practicing style.
That's the interesting thing there, because from my perspective, I was buying it primarily for implant related type stuff, if you like, but the knock-on effect was that the inlays and onlays that were all of a sudden were being transformed from maybe a 40% uptake from a previously an MOD composite or something. All of a sudden, the revenue streams for that alone,
But that's also perhaps
weren't even part of the plan.
Because you believe it as well, because you see it. That's what happened with the CEREC restorations in our practice, because I'm not restorative, but one of the first CEREC restorations we did was on someone quite senior in Henry Schein. And when we saw what was possible with this, and then we started to say to patients, you know what, I would be having this because it's much better. And they said, right, let's have that. And so that side of things ended up funding the investment in our practice of not only the CERECs, but also the CBCT machine. So then everything else we did was a profit centre. And that, because once you have the system in place, or a system in place, then you can start to use it more and more and understand it and gain the benefits from it.
I think, as people walk in the door, when you don't have this stuff, you'll always go to the old system. Once you've got the equipment sitting there, it's amazing how you think, oh, could you use this? And it just becomes the daily routine. And I mean, we use, I use a combination of in-house and the lab stuff. And it sort of depends on both cases and on what the case is. And it's about design, really, And so sometimes, single units, I mean, I do those all the time with the CEREC. We do those ourselves, in-house milling. But some of the bigger cases, we'll work with the lab, and then some of the big cases, we'll work with the lab, we'll get the wax up, we'll get everything set up the right way, but then I can do maybe some of the simpler, the posterior stuff with the CEREC in office. So it's about getting everything set up right, and then you can use which is the most appropriate tool.
What's also really important to understand, though, is that there is a lot of time involved in this, and that's where the team come in. So as early as possible, getting people involved in your team inspired and getting them trained to do as much of the procedures as possible. There's so many benefits to that.
Staff enjoyed that.
Guys are amazing. I mean, the stuff that the amount of stuff that our guys do is extraordinary, and it'll be the same. It'll be the same in your guys' practices, but that has to be the case because there is no chance that there's enough time in my life to fully utilise this system. And that's not a disadvantage. That's an amazing thing because it makes you push it out to your team, and to start to develop them, and then that creates a career pathway for them, and it's just an enormous kind of turnaround. And that's one of when you talk about the fourth industrial revolution, that is the biggest benefit for us, is how we've been able to inspire our team to go through this technology.
And it makes all of our days so much more exciting. Yeah. And they can stand there and aspirate and mix a few materials, or they can get involved in all this stuff. And then they tend to be the best sales team that you've got, because they see what goes on, they see how well it fits, they see how the other patients respond, and then you almost end up doing nothing.
And there's definitely somebody in every practice that wants to do this. They just haven't discovered them yet.
It's unquestionable, and I mean the times that I see the nurses going in opposite directions, one's glazing and staining, one's entering new data for the next new scan, and it's fantastic just to see how it has empowered them completely. It's just it's a win-win for the entire practice and the value that you feel at the end of your working day. So.
One thing I wanted to touch on, Ian, you mentioned in your presentation that you scan every time a patient comes in, and I looked at some of these softwares in Cologne, whereby a 3 or 6 months period on each visit we can scan and we can measure things like tooth wear and gingival recession. And there's also a lot of other software options now when it comes to pulling in CT, looking at endo and things. How valuable is some of that when it comes to doing patient reports and obviously patient profiling with regard to treatments?
I think it's enormously valuable these days. I mean, we're looking at all these big things, but let's just look at digital images. It used to be a real pain when you had to take a photograph, get it developed. Now we're so fortunate. We just take a picture, and now we have a record of how the patient was that day, and hopefully that's a good thing. But some patients don't always take you on board straight away. Whereas if they say, do you think it's worse? Well, we can show them an image. Now, a 2D image is one thing, but actually having a 3D image where we scan them, and then maybe a year or two later they say, oh, do you think this wear is deteriorating, or how about this recession? And you've actually you can scan them again, and it can compare the two scans, and we can see whether we've got more recession. Now we haven't got a situation, because let's be honest, sometimes they feel as though maybe we're trying to get them to do stuff. Well, now there is no doubt about it. It is just the way it is.
A picture speaks 1,000 words, as they always say. So
but then the patient engages with you and is asking you for the solution rather than you sort of selling them the solution, if you like. So they're asking for that stuff. But
very often, as soon as you do a full arch scan, they can immediately visualise what you're talking about.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. And they see it. The same with the digital photographs. The biggest lesson that I've learned as a motor mouth is you take the image, you put it on the screen, and keep quiet. Yeah. And then they'll ask you about it. But just to mention CBCTs and things as well, they're hugely beneficial, and we use them a lot for ortho, so we know where the teeth are in the bone. I know there's a lot of teeth that are just getting moved at the moment, but teeth need to be in the bone, properly surrounded by bone and tissue. and we've got to be careful that we don't move them out of the bone. Sometimes we think that we can move a tooth, but if we see that it's completely surrounded by cortical bone, maybe we can't move it, or it's going to be more difficult. And it's that question, when do you want to find out? And it's just nice to know that stuff ahead of time. We have to balance the radiation and whatever else with the information that we gain. But when you start taking them, you start to see more and more things that you think, how did I manage without this before?
And final question, if I may, again to all of you. Many of our visitors here and delegates for the Digital Symposium will be starting their journey in the digital workflow and looking at investment in equipment. And one of the common questions we get is how quickly can we get the return on investment, which is a multitude of factors. But what will be, looking at your journey, what will be first steps when it comes to choosing equipment and choosing the level of technology in line with the disciplines that the practice is offering?
From my perspective, I say the first thing that you've got to do, and Colin talked about fitting it into your practice, the first thing is to be clear about your vision. What is it that you want in your practice? And then we can choose the best tool for you. You know, it might just be, maybe you're only ready for taking digital images at the moment. Maybe you just want to take impressions and send that off. But you've got to be clear about what it is you're hoping to achieve before you start to engage with buying equipment. And that's what I say, don't get carried away. It's so easy to get carried away, you know, and people can be very persuasive. But sit down for a few moments, either on your own or with your team, and think about what is it we'd like to do. And then go looking for the best equipment to do that. And speak to the people who've used it before. You know, I say there's lots of great people who are more than willing to share their experience with you.
Well, I think you need to have a vision, don't you? You need to know to some degree where your interests are going to lead you. So from the practice owner's perspective, they hopefully will have some idea or a clue where they would like to be in a year's time, and very much focus on that and put the energy into getting the team on board. But by that stage, hopefully, the equipment or whatever you've actually invested in will speak for itself.
Yeah.
If you can't see where your return on investment is, then you need to not invest and find out how to count where your return on investment might be. So you perhaps have identified a learning need within your business knowledge. So for any new product or service that comes into your practice, you should be able to chart where you feel it will be returned upon, because unless you decide that you want to do this as an expensive hobby, you must be able to chart where the ROI is. And that is not particularly difficult to do, and there are loads of people that can show you how to do that, but it depends on the profile of your practice. If you're an orthodontist, it's a different profile to someone who's an aesthetic dentist, which is different to someone who's a general dentist. And it doesn't mean it doesn't work in your practice, it just means you have to decide where that comes from. And then you can decide, and I really like that issue of, you don't have to buy a £70,000 scanner, it doesn't have to be that. It might be the fact that as your trial, you're going to ask your lab to digitize impressions. That might be how you start, right? And you can start, you know, this can go into every single practice. You don't need to have the big bits of kit to digitally plan implant surgery.
Okay, wonderful. Sinead, Colin, Ian, thank you very much indeed for fascinating insight as experienced users. So thank you.
Thank you.